Hello, my name is Perry Freeman. I want to start off by explaining that I'm not giving any legal advice here. I'm not an attorney. I'm not associated with any law firm. I'm strictly throwing out some food for thought for the general public. Being that this is the 75th anniversary of V-Day, the end of World War II, kind of prompted me to air some things out there bugging me. I keep going onto YouTube and seeing these attorneys with the headline and then their spiel about don't talk to the cops, never talk to the cops. Well, I'm a retired cop. My dad was a cop, my uncle was a cop, and my brother was a cop. My dad and my uncle are deceased. My brother's retired, and I'm retired. But being that it's the 75th anniversary, and the fact that not only my father and my uncle were both in law enforcement, but they also fought in World War II. And we're now celebrating that 75th anniversary of the end of that war, where over 400,000 American men and women died, and I've heard as many as 50 or more thousand, 50,000 or more are missing from that war. Do you ever stop to think that 16 million people went to war to fight for this country, America? They weren't soldiers, they weren't sailors, they weren't airmen. They just came together and went to fight for the U.S. Constitution. So, again, that kind of prompted me to do this today. So these attorneys come on and don't ever talk to an attorney, or a cop. Don't ever talk to a cop. Don't ever talk to a cop. Never talk to a cop. Can never do you any good. You can never gain anything. Well, I want to give you another side of that. Again, this isn't legal advice. But let's think about what we're talking about here. We're talking about somebody committing a crime and being interviewed by the police, maybe, right? So what those men and women fought for 75 years ago was our freedom. And what this nation is built on, the U.S. Constitution. And there's socially accepted rules that they fought for. Those are called laws. And so that kind of gets us to what we're talking about. If someone violates one of these socially accepted rules or laws, they may be dealing with the police and the courts, and eventually attorneys. But let's stop and think. First of all, I want you to realize that cops, and I've known many, and I've worked with other countries, law enforcement in other countries. I've worked with law enforcement in many, many states. And I guarantee you 99% of law enforcement are legitimate, honest, hardworking people trying to protect your rights. You only hear about that 1% that makes a mistake. Cops deal with one word, and that's the truth. All law enforcement agencies have a code of ethics, and again, 99% of the cops abide by those ethics and those rules. So that's what law enforcement's doing. They're just trying to get to the truth. Keep that in mind. They're not going to fabricate something like these attorneys might tell you. They're just trying to get to the truth, the facts. So let's look at the attorney. What is the attorney trying to gain? Is he really concerned about you? He or she concerned about you? Or are they concerned about the fee that they might get for representing you? Food for thought. That's all I'm trying to bring it forward here. So the cop doesn't get any extra money to interview you, to do a report and go to court. but the attorney does. The more times he can take you to court, the more times he can appeal, the more times he can motion to have things suppressed, the more money he gets. You know, they wear their high dollar, a couple of $1,000 suits, have their big fancy offices, and either you or the taxpayers pay for that. And they drag out those crimes, and you've seen them. You've seen the big crimes, all the way back to the O.J. Simpson case, up to many others that you've seen on television where they've actually shown a lot of the court procedures. And it's the cops that they always attack. But let me continue, and let's get back to the laws. Where do the laws come from? Well, kind of like, is it the U.S. Constitution? Maybe. While we're talking about the Constitution, let me just point out the areas that the attorneys will tell you that are critical, and they are critical. And it's important that you do have proper representation if you're facing a serious crime in the criminal justice system. Don't get me wrong. Let's take the First Amendment. The First Amendment guarantees our right to free speech, the press, freedom of religion. And keep in mind that I brought up religion because I'm going to go back to that in a few minutes. So the First Amendment is our right to free speech, to gather legally, to have our choice in religion, and that the government can't force any particular religion on us. So that's kind of like the First Amendment. So that's an important one. Probably the next one would be the Fourth Amendment, and the attorneys look into this a lot, and this is where they challenge what the police have done many times. It has to do with unreasonable search and seizure, and rightfully so. Cops can't do an illegal search. They can't do. They can't force people to do anything really until their guidelines allow them to. Let's say if they have to get physical with somebody. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about talking to the police. The Fifth Amendment is kind of what we call the show cause amendment, and has to do with mainly the fact that a person doesn't ever have to be a witness against themselves, and that's exactly what we're talking about here. You can't be compelled or forced to talk to the police or to take the stand and try to defend yourself in a trial. That's the Fifth Amendment. It's also considered the Due Process Amendment, which means basically that you've got to have evidence, probable cause, to take someone and charge them with a crime and take them to court. The Sixth Amendment has to do with speedy trial and the fact that you do have a right to an attorney. Doesn't mean you have to have one, but if you're in court on a serious crime, you should have one. But we're talking about talking to the police from the get-go. These attorneys, they go on YouTube and other places and warn you never talk to the police. They're going to twist everything. They're going to turn everything around. That part's not true. That is not true. I've been around this a long time. And the cops that I've known just don't do that. Now, again, keep in mind that they have ethics that they live by, and that they're only searching for the truth. So, if you're not guilty, and these attorneys are telling you, even if you didn't do the crime, don't talk to the cops. Well, if you're not guilty, why the heck wouldn't you talk to the cops? Go in, tell them whatever. I'm not involved. I wasn't there. I don't know this guy. I didn't do it. Whatever. That's not going to be twisted or turned in a report. It just doesn't happen. Now, if you are guilty, well, the attorneys are going to tell you never talk to the police. And they're just firm on that. Well, maybe you might consider that it could be the lesser of evils. I think a judge and a jury like to see a remorseful defendant in the courtroom. So when someone is called in by the police or taken in by the police, and that person cooperates and actually confesses, makes admissions, confesses, that's usually going to be filmed. Judges like that. They're trying to rehabilitate people. So a remorseful defendant looks good to a judge. Now, if you refuse to talk to the police and you and your attorney get together and you put a plan together, excuse me, and then in court, your attorney's going to motion to suppress this, motion to suppress that, and it's going to go on and on and on. And the judge is going to hear everything that you did. Okay? Where if you've already confessed, the prosecutor and the defense attorney are going to kind of get together and agree on something, what's called a plea bargain. And if that defendant was cooperative and helped wrap up the case and shows that remorse, the prosecutor is going to be just like the cops. They're not going to try to add on time or whatever. They're going to recommend something reasonable. So it might be the lesser of evils to talk to the police. That's my point. So, get so tired of seeing those attorneys telling people, never talk to the cops. I've actually seen a judge on the stand after sentencing a young man tell him in open court, and he had confessed to the police, and he got a light sentence, and the judge says, never talk to the police. You don't have to talk to the police. Don't you ever talk to the police. A judge on the stand. Of course, keep in mind, the judge is an attorney. Do with that as you will. All right. Keep in mind, cops have ethics. They're looking for the truth. They're not looking to fabricate something. I don't want to drag this out too long. I just want to make this point. Attorneys spend so much time fighting against the police, trying to suppress everything that they've done. I might suggest that maybe they should go back and attack the U.S. Constitution. Because where do these laws come from? They come from our legislative bodies, federal, state, local. But where do these laws actually come from? I want you to stop and think about maybe they come from a religious background? Oh my. What about church and state? The separation of church and state, which we hear all the time. Well, I'd like to suggest that most of the laws are based right out of Exodus. I think it's chapter 20, where Moses comes down with the Ten Commandments. The fifth commandment, I believe, has to do something with honor thy mother and thy father. How an attorney can look in the mirror and sleep at night, I don't know. But I wouldn't say they're honoring their mother and father by coming into court and creating outrageous defenses for their clients. And the same with the defendant. Why would you lie about it? If you can't do the time, don't do the crime, as they say. The eighth commandment is thou shalt not steal. Of course, theft has to do with a lot of our crime, so keep that in mind. Where did that come from? It came from the Ten Commandments, I would say. The ninth commandment is thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. Well, when we're in court and we're under oath and we're on the record, should we think about the ninth commandment? Thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. Again, I don't know how some people sleep at night. And the 10th commandment is thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's property, wife, etc. Kind of plays into a lot of crime, actually, I suppose. Anyway, I just wanted to throw that in there. So again, I would suggest that all these attorneys that want to go after the cops, maybe you just need to go back and start at the beginning and challenge the U.S. Constitution and the laws that are on our statute books. Because you go in and you make your living off of defending people who may have committed crimes against our statutes and laws that I'm saying many come right out of the Bible. So, food for thought. Again, I'm not an attorney, not giving legal advice. I'm just throwing some things out there for people to think about. So, in defense of those over 400,000 people that lost their lives over 75 years ago, and the 50,000 or more that are missing, I just felt obligated to have a chat today. And you know I'm serious. There's no reason not to talk to the cops. And while I'm on this topic, these First Amendment warriors that go out and film cops and challenge cops and won't cooperate with cops, won't show their ID or whatever, really? Get a life. How far do you think we would go? How many hours do you think the American civilization would survive without law enforcement out there every day risking their lives? Daily, every day. I would say a few hours and we would be in major chaos. But yet you guys have nothing better to do than to go out and pester the cops who's trying to do their jobs. God, get a life, man. I guess that's about all I've got to say. Just wanted to get that off my chest. If you like this, please hit the like, and I'm sure there'll be a whole bunch of you that don't like it. And subscribe to my channel, Cop Facts, if you would. I've got lots of information over there. And I guess that's about it. So support your law enforcement and support the military is what I'm going to leave you with. Have a good day.